I am here today with Grace Cashman, a member of the Velocity Advisory Group team and the author of our recent article, How Smart Leaders Can Unlock Gen Z's Professional Potential. As more and more of Gen Z professionals are entering the workforce, leaders have a tremendous opportunity and, frankly, a responsibility to understand what drives them and how to bring out their best. Grace has done great work exploring how leaders can bridge generational differences and strengthen connection across teams. And also on our website, there is a 10 tips and tricks of how we can operate within this realm and really help manage and lead Gen Z individuals. I shared a video on that last week where I was ranting about it, and I thought, I should probably bring Grace on and we should just talk about this right up front. So, Grace, I just want to jump in and you talk about the importance of understanding Gen Z's motivations. And from what you've seen, what's the biggest misconception that leaders can create or that leaders still have about this generation, or they can create in their minds about this generation in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to Gen Z, but one of the biggest is probably that Gen Z doesn't want to work hard. When in reality, I think they just have a different definition of what hard work really is. They're not interested in really climbing that traditional corporate ladder that we see some individuals wanting to do, but what they really care about is this purpose and impact. If they can see the connection between what they're doing and the organization's mission, or even their broader impact on clients and customers, Gen Z will really give it their all. But if that why piece kind of isn't there, they'll tend to disengage. I like to say that Gen Z isn't really allergic to work. They're more allergic to meaningless work. So leaders really have to take that time to clarify the purpose and the outcomes, which will really unlock the Gen Z's motivation.
I love that. And I think it's interesting that, another team member here at Velocity, Ryan Payne, talks about helping leaderships lead with
Mm,
clarity and accountability and empathy. And it's that clarity that stands out. And,
yeah,
the allergic to work, I've heard that before. I've seen that on my
exactly.
Instagram, but I also know that more and more, I feel like Gen Z is almost teaching the millennials a little bit as well in terms of like, hey, if something's just thrown over the fence to you with no explanation, no reason why, no clear purpose or outcome, you don't just have to do it. You're allowed to go
Right.
back and say, what do you want me to do? Why
Yeah.
am I doing this? And so I think it's a really interesting call out. And then, I think it ties into our second question, which is highlighting how strong leaders can unlock Gen Z's potential by
Mm,
aligning, I think you said that purpose and performance. And so, what
yeah.
are, for those listening, what are one or two practical ways that leaders can create that connection on their teams?
Yeah, I love this question because I think there are a lot of leaders that see Gen Z entering the workforce as something they have to brace for or something that's going to require this massive overhaul. But in reality, there are some really simple, actionable things that leaders can do, as you said, to really unlock Gen Z's potential. So first, going back to that purpose and impact, really being transparent about the why. This generation really grew up with this instant access to information. So when they don't have that clear reasoning behind decisions, it creates frustration. Now, I want to clarify though, transparency doesn't mean oversharing. I've had some leaders look at me and say, but we can't tell employees everything. We can't be completely transparent. And to that, I agree. That's okay. But here, transparency really means providing the context to things. When we explain the why behind the goals or the changes, you really give Gen Z that connection to what you're asking. The second thing I would suggest here is really creating space for growth opportunities. For Gen Z, professional development really isn't a perk in the workplace, it's more of an expectation. But they can be these little growth opportunities. It doesn't have to be a whole new role title or a new promotion. It can really even be mentorship programs, stretch projects, regular career conversations, really showing that you're invested in their future and not just their output. And a bonus tip, recognition. Gen Z thrives on feedback that's specific and authentic. Small, genuine little call outs and acknowledgments. It can be public, it can be just one-on-one, really goes a long way with them.
I love it. Those are three things that leaders can implement tomorrow. And at the same
Right.
time, we were talking about before we started recording that I think a lot of times teams think that this has to be some radical change, some
Exactly.
transformation, and it's going to put our millennials or X generation in a different seat. And it's not. It's things in the margins that we can do. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot at Velocity is just how can we instill more of that development into the
Mm,
day to day, into the month to month? And you kind of said it's the expectation. I think more and more, this isn't a nice to have. It's a
right.
must have. It's a non negotiable. If you're going to be comparing, one offer at a job to another, or you're thinking about job hopping, that is something that is going to be able to retain that top
Mm,
talent, and especially the rising potential of this generation as well, which I think brings us to our last question, which is,
yeah.
when I posted that video, we had a comment in there about 2012. The 13-year-old is not
Mm,
reshaping leadership expectations right now, but 1997 is right around
sure.
the what 28. You're a 28-year-old, 27-year-old. You are a future leader, and some
Yeah.
of them already are leading. And so, how do you see Gen Z reshaping leadership expectations as more and more of them continue to enter the workforce, and what should organizations start doing now to prepare for
Mm.
that shift over the next 3, 5, even 10 years down the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think Gen Z is really redefining what they want in a leader. They're expecting leaders to not just be focused on their outcomes, but really focus on the people that are driving those outcomes. And I think one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing as a result of Gen Z kind of entering the workforce is around this concept of well-being. And oftentimes, when I say that, and it's in tandem with talking about Gen Z, I think the image that really pops into people's minds is a 20 something in their pajamas, half working from bed, scrolling on TikTok, and kind of hitting that space bar every once in a while to continuously being active on whatever work platform they're on.
Mm-hmm.
But I really want to challenge that image. And I think when we're talking about well being and Gen Z in the same sentence, well-being is not about not working. It's really about being seen as an individual. And really, what Gen Z is saying is if you want us to perform well, if you want high performance, you have to respect our capacity. Leaders, they want leaders who are really balancing that work-life balance, but also talking openly about burnout and really building that trust that kind of sustains an engagement over time. So just simply acknowledging that you are an individual, you have things going on outside of work, and hey, those are going to kind of intersect sometimes, and that's okay. Just really that acknowledgement. And I think Gen Z is really reminding everybody in the workforce that productivity and well-being aren't opposites, they're really partners and they kind of work together hand in hand.
I love this so much because I think that this concept of just well-being in general is
Yeah,
something that was looked at negatively for a really long
exactly.
time. And our president Brooke Page Thompson and I have a lot of content in our Getting Unstuck series about the concept of well-being. And I actually
Mm,
have a sticky note right here, which was her definition of well-being, which is comfort, happiness, and health.
I
And
love that.
if I have those three things, I promise you I'm going to be a better employee if
Yep,
I have those three things. And having them does not put me in a position to be a bad employee. It doesn't mean that
right.
I'm not working as hard. In fact, like you said, there's probably a tie, that when I feel those things, I am more productive at work, and I,
Exactly.
I am in a better position. So I love this concept. And I think, like you said, the redefining of the leadership, but also just repositioning of what
Mm,
mental health and well-being and that dreaded like work-life balance conversation is. I feel like there is a different perspective on that now with Gen Z leading the charge in a lot of ways to
yeah.
reshape that a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you said, it's really just acknowledging it. You
Yeah.
don't have to revert to a work from home model or other kind of work models. It's really just acknowledging that, hey, I understand you're a person.
Yep.
I understand you've got other things going on sometimes. And really just that respect will really go a long way when it comes to Gen Z.
Yep, we are all humans, and we are
Exactly.
all in this boat. So I love it. Grace, thank you so much for taking
Of
some time
course.
to share your insights. It's such an important conversation for leaders across every industry. And I also think it's an important conversation for those Gen Z individuals who are nearing leadership
Mm,
and they're going from being a high potential individual contributor to a manager over the next couple of years to start to understand, how to manage up and manage down. And so I can absolutely foresee me dragging you on to the longer version of our podcast later in the year and into 2026, and having a deeper conversation on that. But in the meantime, if you haven't already, make sure you go to the Velocity Advisory Group website, check out Grace's full article. There's a really fun infographic on there with just those quick hitting tips on how smart leaders can unlock Gen Z's professional potential. And just remember that at Velocity, we help leaders align teams and cultures so everyone can perform at their best, including the next generation of talent. And that is something that, if you can't tell from 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes with Grace and I, that we are very fired up about doing. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.